What is going on, everybody? In this video, we're providing you a state of the market and stock picks for October 12th, 2022. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing, as I do provide daily and weekly updates to get you prepared for the day and the week ahead in this glorious market. Now, today there was actually quite a bit of action. It was really interesting to see how today played out. Obviously, tomorrow being the big day, we have the core CPI tomorrow. And something else to understand too is we do have bank earnings coming up as well. Now, that being said, the bank earnings are starting off on essentially you got JPM, which is on Thursday. So you do have a couple towards the back half of this week, but ultimately, core CPI tomorrow and FOMC minutes tomorrow. The minutes I'm not so worried about. It really depends on how bad the core is. If the core is bad and you get more bad hawkish news coming out of the meeting notes, it's just going to add fuel to the fire. Whereas if you get okay core and then potentially whatever bad news or so news from the minutes, I don't think the minutes really have a lot of weight. To be honest, aside from the downside if things are already bad in the morning with the core. Now, what we're looking at tomorrow as far as the core, so far we've essentially kind of peaked at 9.1 thus far. We've came down to 8.5 after two 75-point basis moves, which led us to an 8.3 drop, which was not a lot at all. Considering we had two 75-point basis moves, and then we came in with a third 75-point basis move, and now we've kind of been drifting since then in hopes that there might be some quantitative easing or something. But we have to understand that the Fed can't let up unless there's a real dramatic drop in core. The Fed will continue to hammer rates down our throat until there's a significant change. It needs to be significant, or this isn't going to matter. It doesn't matter if it's dropping a little bit, it needs to be significant. And that's what they're looking for. And so tomorrow is really going to matter. We need something. We definitely don't want it hovering around 8.5. And we obviously do not want it over 9.1. We want it much lower. If we can get into the sevens, I think that would show a lot more progress and provide hope, which could potentially make the market run. You have to understand, if there's any hope in this market's going to rip. It's not going to do a complete pivot reversal, but it's going to rip. Just be mindful of that. And one thing, and even though my thesis is very bearish, we are getting to a point where it will be pivotal, but it just isn't yet. There hasn't been anything that's really proven for it to be pivotal yet. There is just way too much bad news leading up to stuff that still hasn't rolled out, and that's why I keep with this bearish tone because of that fact. Because I am a perma bull, but understand that there is still a lot of bearish setups that are occurring right now that haven't quite played out, and the timing of those will really matter. Especially if that timing is now and it breaks us on the support. Now, this is something to consider and really be watching what I've been seeing in the price action here. And what is interesting to me is we have held this 35.68. We've broken new lows here. We ran. We've been breaking almost new lows for past couple times. Every time we broke a new low, we pull back, we break a new low, pull back, break a new low, pull back. It's not flushing. And that's what you need to consider. And this is why price action is huge. Why you really need to learn price action, because someone is buying heavily at these levels and holding the market at this level. Now, whoever it is, whatever the case is, it is a very strong hold. Every time we break a new low, it is automatically just sucked up and the market holds. Tomorrow, I want to see how the market takes the core. Where is the core going to be, obviously, but how is the market going to take the core? If we see a new high, you can say goodbye because it's going to flush in core. Or if we see a deduction and possibly drop down like a 7.5, that can be really bullish in a sense. We need a bigger drop. That doesn't mean the Fed is not going to slow down on rates. It's a nice drop, but they needed to come down way more than that. You have to understand they needed to come down to like a 4, and 275 back-to-backs have barely even put a chink in the armor. You have to understand, just because it would drop down to maybe 7.5 doesn't mean it's going to stop the Fed from hammering rates. The Fed will continue to hammer rates. You have to understand that. And there's going to be hopium that the Fed will let off, but that's not the case. That's not the way it's going to play out. You have to make sure the inflation stays down. You can't let the inflation come down and then just stop. You have to keep hammering it until it comes down to a solid level, and then you let it sit and just not do anything to see what it does. And if they're not doing anything and it still remains the same, then you can start slowly taking some off at that point. And it's a long process. It's not a quick flip. Oh, well, it came down enough, so let's go ahead and dial it back. No, that's not the way it's going to work. This is very different. And this is a very sensitive subject here because of that fact. Is inflation will run away. If you are not careful and start dialing back too quickly, inflation will get so out of hand that there's no way you're going to catch up to it. And right now, the way the rates have been going up, it's already doing tons of damage to corporations in the layoffs. And we're about ready to see that. But the question is the market going to hold? Where is the core coming in? And even if we get bad earnings, will the market hold or not? These are the two biggest things the market is watching right now. And I think more so plays than whatever, if it's another 75-point basis move. I think the 75-point basis move is becoming the norm, and people are becoming numb to the essentially the rate increases or the moves that we're essentially increasing the monetary policy that we're talking about. And I don't think anybody really cares so much about that anymore. Right now, it's are we beating inflation or are we not? And how is it affecting corporations? That weighs more than the policy now. And I think will continue to weigh more in the future, especially if it's only 75. If it comes in 100, well, that's fear and panic. I think that's what they haven't done it, because if they say 100-point basis move, the market will panic. And the only way I think that would happen is if we came over a 9.1. Then you would put the Fed in a panic mode, and they would in turn do a 100-point basis move, which would put the complete market in a panic. And then you might actually see a real flush at that point. But it really just depends on how the core is. So, being said, tomorrow very pivotal. That report comes out at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time before the market even opens. So we really want to watch this level. These levels really don't matter because we've been breaking new lows, and we've been holding. That's what I keep saying, to learn price action, because there's a reason why we're holding. Because if it is anything positive, this market is going to rip so fast. The bears are going to get trapped and totally screwed here. And there's so much downward pressure that no one's expecting it. And normally that's when it flips. So being said, this is why I say you got to be neutral, because you're not really sure what's going to happen. There's still a lot of bad news that's rolling out, but hopium is much stronger in this market than anything else. If you give the market hopium that inflation's coming down, that weighs more than monetary policy. Even if they raise it another 75, that weighs more than what's going on with non-farms. That weighs more than what's going on with earnings, even though earnings are really bad. The point being is that the core is coming down. That's more sign of hope. You got two back-to-back. We've had two back-to-back drops, but this would be a significant drop. And that's what we're looking for, is a more significant drop. But again, I don't think it's going to stop the monetary policy from coming at 75. So, being said, again, tomorrow will be very interesting. Again, the price action is very interesting in the way that we don't just flush when we break. So that is something to really consider here and moving forward, and not try to be so bearish that you get wrecked. And if this thing does flip. So again, level really doesn't matter. Again, if it does break the 35.82, I mean, that's the level we're watching. If it can break that, I mean, really, if the core is bad, this thing is just going to flush. That's when we're going to actually get the flush. And that's when I'm buying, when this thing flushes hard. And then seeing, because I don't think it's going to be, when it flushes, I don't think it's going to be down here long before the market turns. Even no matter what's coming in the following months, I think it could be a reversal point. I think you have to believe that to some extent, that the market has reached its full capacity at that point, full panic, and I think our market can start moving up from that point, but we'll see what happens. Bitcoin, again, was key level, watching that 18K mark. If the market flushes, this is going to flush. Just really going to say that, and then see where this lands. Again, I don't expect it to come much further down. Maybe it hits the 15, maybe it goes lower than that. I did at one point think it would hit 8, but you definitely need a lot of these black swan events that I talk about. Everything has to play out. If it's not timed right, you're not going to see those lower levels, right? If you have back-to-back black swans plus the recession plus everything else, that's when you would get a flush down to some lower levels where you might see Bitcoin under 10K. Aside from that, I'm not sure you're going to be able to see that, not with the current news. And again, none of it's new news, and we're getting very numb to what's going on right now. Tesla. Now, Tesla at a very interesting level. This thing can drop a little bit more. I did buy into some Tesla today, but it could go down to the 210. And then again, if it breaks that, you have the monthly support roughly around that 200. So really kind of watching this. It has been selling off a lot. Again, the Twitter news does not help Tesla, but nonetheless, again, if the market gets good news, this thing is going to rip, right? They still had good numbers, even though they missed the expectation, still had great numbers. So they could still beat to an extent. May not be by a lot, but I think they can still beat with everything they're invested in. So just be mindful of that. So I think this thing could reverse well, especially after we get over the core. The thing is we're going to get the core. We're going to do our selling for maybe a week or a couple of days, and then we're going to turn around and start running again, right? Because we've sold off so heavily coming into this in anticipation that I think, again, Tesla could run. I think it could rip pretty heavy back up at least to the 256 as a pre-earning run after the core, and then realize monetary policy isn't until the beginning of next month. So that would give us a window to start running. And so this thing could recover pretty quickly. Tesla is a good stock. This is why I like this stock, because it recovers quickly, extremely quickly, as it is also being one of the safe havens. BA again. So we'll have to see. BA again, this thing is going to flush if the market flushes currently right now. Looks like a big bear flag, a very big ascending wedge. So could see a little bit of flush there. But if we could break back above the 136, I think we would be okay there. Banks, JPM, again, massive flush. There's your flush. That's what I'm talking about. This banks could come way down, and this is your first sign when you get a clean break like this on the banks. That's not a good sign. So just be mindful of that. So again, bank earnings are on the 14th, so it's on Friday, so we'll watch for that one. Goldman Sachs is on the 18th. So watch this one for a breakdown here to this 289 level. And again, Bank of America is already retesting that, so looking for a retest here. Or my lines went on this one, but look for a retest here at the $30 mark for it will drop at that point. So again, if it breaks this major level, kind of like the market, then this thing's going to flush pretty heavy. So that's pretty much what I got. I don't want to put too much out there. Again, it's all depending on a core. It really depends where that core lands and how the market will react. Again, if we come in the 7s, I think that's going to cause a lot of hope and could push this market up. Just be mindful of that. Don't go running in. And you're obviously going to see the move before the market opens, but realize that if we do come down into the 7s, I think that would provide a lot of hope in the market. If we, again, hover around 8, I think the market will sell. Maybe not a lot, but I think it will sell. Could potentially even start pushing. It really just depends. We have to kind of see how the market takes it. Means we're kind of stabilizing inflation to some extent. And then the next move would be 9.1. If it's, again, 9.1, the market's total panic, 100-point basis move on the table. and the market just flushes and we have a nasty day. So a couple different outcomes there. It's always good to understand what could potentially happen and kind of come up with that thesis and what will be happening. Now, don't just be one-sided. You have to think about the other different options that could play out. What happens? There's no one-for-one deal here. It's there's multiple things that could occur from one outcome. You have to know what they are and how it affects other things, and build a thesis upon that. And then when you see whatever does play out on your different options or potential theories that could happen. And when you see it play out, then you take a move from that point. So just be mindful of that. It definitely helps as opposed to just going blindly and just reading a chart. I think it's important to use the chart and use your knowledge about events, what has weight, and then again determine uh, what scenario is playing out that you have already thought out in advance. So that being said, if you made it this far, appreciate you. Go ahead and drop a like button. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.